G'day guys, there's one stratagem in the World Eaters Codex that is simply not being talked about enough, and that is the Summoned by Slaughter stratagem in the Khorne Demonkin detachment. I genuinely believe that this is the most powerful stratagem in the entire game, and it is easily the most powerful stratagem available to World Eaters players. And today I want to take you through 10 different case uses for this stratagem and some really interesting ways that you can use this to have a massive impact on your game. And I think this stratagem alone goes a long way towards making a case that the Khorne Demonkin is the most powerful detachment. It truly is that insane. And today what we're going to do is we're going to break out some models, and I'm actually going to show you some real life examples of how you can use this stratagem to absolutely flip the tide of the game and turn losing games into wins and winning games into absolutely crushing victories. So with that being said, let's jump over into the video.
Look for the blood god.
Alrighty guys, I think the best place to start is by pulling up this stratagem and having a look at what it does. So let's pull the stratagem up now. Alrighty, so it's a strategic ploy. It only costs 1 command point, which in my opinion is absolutely criminal. But either way, in any phase, when the last model from a unit is destroyed, before removing that model, one Bloodletters unit from your army that's in reserves is the target of the stratagem, and you get to set that unit up anywhere on the battlefield, wholly within 9 inches of that last model that's about to be removed, as long as it's not within engagement range of any enemy units, and then you remove that last destroyed model from play. And the only restrictions are that you cannot use this stratagem more than once per battle round. Now it's worth noting you also can't use this in the first turn if you went first, because it's the same as like a rapid ingress where you can't use it in that first turn. There's a few people online that have been talking about doing this in the first turn, but that is not how it works. That has been FAQ'd by the WTC, and I'm sure that the GW FAQ will come out shortly that will confirm that as well. But it's worth noting you cannot do this in the first battle round, but every other battle round it's free use. You can use it whenever you want, and you can use it in any phase, which is really, really exciting as well. So we're going to jump over into some case uses for this, and then we're going to pull some models out and have a look. So let's break these down. Alright, I've broken these down into different segments because this is one of the most diverse stratagems in the entire game, in that it has offensive, defensive, and strategic applications, all of which are very different and unique from each other. So in this section, we're going to talk about the defensive uses of this stratagem. And the first one is to hold objectives when you're shot off of them. So we're all familiar with the Berserker Warband stratagem to stick you an objective when you die. This can function in a similar manner. Provided you've got those Bloodletters in reserves, it means if your opponent shoots you off of an objective, you can just go, cool, spending 1 CP, and now I'm putting Bloodletters on that objective, and I continue to hold it. Which essentially performs a similar function to sticking it on Jeff, because you continue to control it, but it gives you the added benefit of having a Bloodletter unit there. So that's a really effective way of increasing your defensibility. The next one is to move block your opponents. This is another way that you can use the stratagem defensively by going, my opponent's moved up, they're about to charge something, then in their turn they shoot something and kill it. I'm going to summon Bloodletters within 9 inches of that last model that's removed, and I'm going to create a string to prevent my opponent from charging the thing that they were planning to. This is really, really effective as well and can absolutely disrupt your opponent's plans. And the next way that you can use this defensively is setting up heroic intervention plays, where your opponent sees a unit out in the open and they're like, yep, cool, it's on its own, I'm going to move out there, I'm going to shoot this other unit, and then all of a sudden you summon Bloodletters near that first unit, and now if they go to charge that unit, they're going to get heroic intervention from Bloodletters and murdered in the melee phase. So setting up those heroic interventions in positions your opponent wasn't and couldn't really expect you to have units is immensely powerful. So those are the 3 defensive ways, and like I said, in a moment we'll pull some models out and I'll show you how to apply these on the tabletop using real models, but that's an overview of the defensive use of this stratagem. Now let's jump over and talk about some of the offensive uses. Alright, so the first and most obvious offensive use is to charge deep into your opponent's lines. Normally, if you've got a unit in strategic reserves, you can arrive via deep strike 9 inches away from your opponent. However, with this stratagem, you can shoot a unit dead with a Forge Fiend, then you can spend a CP to summon the Bloodletters within 9 inches of that unit that you just shot dead, and then you can charge from there, as opposed to charging from 9 inches away. This can mean that you get a 1-inch charge, unfailable, and it also means that you can project this unit even deeper into your opponent's lines if you need to, making it very easy to take your opponent's home objective. The next offensive use for this is simply taking objectives off of your opponent. So your opponent might be in the open and on an objective, and what you can do is you can go kill a nearby unit and then summon Bloodletters onto the objective that your opponent is holding and put 10 OC on there and take it off of them. This is really, really effective way of taking an objective off your opponent without having to necessarily engage them. You might move out, charge their unit, kill it in the fight phase, and then summon Bloodletters on the objective. And now you've been able to take the objective without actually sending your combat unit onto that objective, which is plenty of scenarios where that's the ideal situation that you want to try to create. And then the last offensive case use that I have for you is what I call the OC dump. And basically this is where you take an objective marker that your opponent thinks they have enough OC to prevent you from taking it off them. This is particularly valuable in World Eaters because a lot of our units are low OC. You know, you got 8 bound, they're only OC 1 each, spawner only OC 1 each, so it can be very difficult for us to take objectives off of our opponent. But what you're able to do in these situations is send out a unit, kill something, pile in onto the objective, and then also summon Bloodletters on the objective and just dump a ton of OC on that objective marker. And that's going to allow you to flip objectives that your opponent thought they had secured. Alright, now let's talk about some strategic uses of this stratagem. There's some really interesting stuff that you can do here. Some of them are going to leave your opponent with a little bit of a feels bad, but these are all perfectly legal moves, and if done in the right way, are going to be really, really impactful on the game. One of them is to block your opponent inside of their transports. You can send a unit of 8 bound or a Hellbrood or whatever to charge a Rhino, and then when you kill the Rhino, you can basically, before that model's removed, right, you get to place all of your Bloodletters around that model, taking up all of the space that your opponent was planning to disembark into. And as a result, you can force them to use the emergency disembarkation, which means that they're going to be taking mortal wounds at an alarming frequency. You can also use it to force them to disembark in such a way where they're not near an objective marker. You can force them to disembark in certain areas of the board where they're able to be piled into and then fought by other units. There's tons of really cool stuff you can do by basically killing the transport. Off the death of the transport, you summon in the Bloodletters, and you can dictate where your opponent is going to place their units. And this is amazingly powerful. Another real neat trick is messing with your opponent's consolidation moves. Now, if your opponent charges you and they kill your unit, after you remove your last model, typically your opponent then makes consolidation moves. And they can use those consolidation moves to tag things like your Forge Fiends to prevent them from shooting. They can use it to tag certain units so that in your turn, if you want to fight something, you can't fall back and charge, so you're stuck fighting the unit that you might not want to be fighting, those sorts of things. But because this stratagem is used immediately before the last model is removed, they charge something, they kill it, before you remove that last model, you can place these Bloodletters in such a way that forces your opponent to consolidate into the Bloodletters, as opposed to the things that they wanted to. So maybe they wanted to kill you and then consolidate onto an objective. You can go, nope, 1 CP, putting Bloodletters down, and now it's like, if you want to consolidate, you have to consolidate into the Bloodletters, which means you can't get on the objective. And you can deny your opponent that way. Or they might have been like, yep, cool, I'm going to fight this thing and I'm going to consolidate in, and then this next unit is, because it made a charge, it's going to pile into and fight something. And you're like, nope, when that first unit dies, I'm putting Bloodletters down, and now you have to hit Bloodletters, right? So it's a really good way of using these Bloodletters as a sacrificial unit to prevent your opponent from consolidating in the direction that they want to. This is a massive one, and I've got 2 or 3 examples of this that I'll show you guys in a moment. The next case use in a strategic context is denying your opponent certain scores. So let's say your opponent's going for area denial, you've got a couple spawn on the center objective, and they go in and they're like, cool, I'm going to kill your spawn off of the objective, I'm going to take the objective myself, and I'm going to score area denial in the process. Well, what you can do is you can go, no, well, that's going to be a several point swing if you do that. So I'm going to spend a CP and put my bloodletters there. And now you're not getting area denial because there's an enemy unit within 3 inches of the center. So you don't get your area denial and you don't score the objective. There's some really cool stuff you can do where your opponent's lining up to do a certain thing. It might be storm hostile objective. They're going to try and take control of an objective that you controlled at the start of your turn. So they jump out, they charge, they kill your jackals or your 8-bound or whatever it is that you have on the objective, and you just go, cool, nope, I'm going to spend a CP, I'm going to put my bloodletters on that objective, so you now don't control the objective, so you don't get your storm hostile objective, and I now have bloodletters ready to charge whatever it is that you just sent on. So there's lots of really cool uses of where your opponent lines up their game plan based on the objectives that they got, or whatever their game plan is. And when you can see what their plan is, you see what they're trying to do, you can use bloodletters to disrupt that plan. And we've got a few examples that we'll go through of that as well. All right, and then this last trick I've put in here for a few reasons. One of them is that I wanted to have 10 reasons. And one of them is that this is actually one of those counterintuitive plays that a lot of people wouldn't think to do that actually can have a pretty significant impact on the game. And that is what I call the suicide summon. And this is where you go, this stratagem's obviously it procs when something dies. So what you can do is you can see a big scary unit and you can intentionally move out, charge your jackals into that unit, knowing that your jackals are not going to hurt it. The unit that you just charged is going to kill your jackals in response, but then you can summon your bloodletters 9 inches behind that unit because they can proc 9 inches off of where the jackals are. And that's going to allow you to use your own units as a suicide to trigger a summon to send those bloodletters deeper into your opponent's lines, which is not only an amazing strategy to deploy on the tabletop, but could you imagine a more World Eaters strategy than intentionally killing your own stuff in order to summon corn demons to the battlefield? Like, GW have absolutely knocked it out of the park with this stratagem. This is absolutely amazing. It's on point thematically. It's also very strategically interesting, and it's very powerful. So with all of that being said, that is 10 different case uses for how to get the most out of this stratagem. But I know what you guys want to see, and that is models on the table demonstrating some of these stratagems, some of these strategies, I should say. So I'm going to flip the camera now, and we're going to have a look at some case studies in real time. Alrighty guys, I've set up a few scenarios here where we're going to use this summoned by slaughter stratagem to massive effect. We've got a World Eaters army arrayed in front of us here, and we've got Night Lords spread out across the rest of the table. And in this standard sort of arrangement, I'm going to show you all 10 techniques on how you can use this stratagem to absolutely flip the game in your favor. So let's flip the camera over and have a look around and go through these examples one by one. All right, this first example, pretty straightforward. Our Night Lords player's got a unit of Havocs over here, and they've lined up to kill this Halberd over here, and that Halberd is the only model holding this objective. So in most other detachments, this would be a problem for us because those Havocs could shoot, pretty easily pick up that Halberd, and then that has denied us that objective because we're not on it anymore, and therefore when it ticks over into our turn, we're not going to score those primary points. However, with this Summoned by Slaughter stratagem, the second our opponent does that, and that Halberd is removed as a casualty, immediately before removing him, we can place down our sexy little bloodletters here and tell our opponent to suck it, as we now still control that objective. Now it's worth noting on this one to be careful, because if your opponent has a secondary shooting target lined up, they could then shoot those bloodletters, because you have to summon these guys immediately after removing the Halberd. So be careful for that one, because your opponent can interact with it. However, there's some scenarios where perhaps this objective marker was partially behind a wall, and you're able to summon on the other side of the wall where you can't be shot. There's a few different ways that you can maximize this to sort of safeguard that. Another way that you could do it is that the Halberd was right here. You can summon these bloodletters anywhere, provided they're within 9 inches of that Hellbrute, right? So what you could do is you could actually put the majority of the bloodletters in behind a wall somewhere, like over here. Most of the bloodletters are in behind here, and then you trail out 1 or 2 just to make sure that you are still holding that objective. And now, by doing so, you're still holding the objective, you're tucked in behind this ruin here, so you're going to be very difficult for your opponent to shoot. And if your opponent does shoot you and kill these 2 bloodletters off the objective, right, now they can't shoot the rest of the unit, and then in your turn you can spend another command point to summon D6 bloodletters and summon these 2 back onto that objective immediately before the command phase, during the command phase, before you score. So, combination of being able to summon those bloodletters back and being able to place them partially behind a wall is an amazingly powerful combination, and there's not much your opponent can do to prevent you, short of throwing a ton of models at that objective, which might be what you're looking for, because you have things like Forge Fiends nearby, you've got Berserkers nearby, you can respond to that threat if they overcommit, and if they undercommit, they're actually not going to achieve their stated goal. Alright, the next example that we have set up for you is this Night Lord's army, which has a considerable force over here, and they're planning to come in and destroy all of these World Eaters back here. However, we have these spawn out in front. Now, let's say we've got this Rhino, Abaddon and his unit of Chosen have disembarked. They do their movement phase, and they come up nice and close, like so. I'm not going to roll their advance, but let's assume they get up, relatively close. They're coming in to charge this Land Raider and kill it. And then these Warp Talons come along. They're coming up. They're going to try and charge those Khorne Berserkers to kill them. So your opponent's moved up a ton of stuff, and they're hoping to wipe this entire side of the board. But then they make a critical mistake, and this Vindicator here, or this Vindicator here, shoot and kill these 2 spawn. Now, normally, that's not a problem, because these guys are still going to be able to charge the Land Raider, these guys are still going to be able to charge the Berserkers. However, we have Summoned by Slaughter, which is something that most people are not going to be able to predict, and not be able to plan for. And basically, we're going to remove this guy first as a casualty, then we're going to remove this guy, which means that within 9 inches of him, we can place our bloodletters. And basically, you can place the first bloodletter here, which is 9 inches away, another bloodletter here, which is within 9 inches, and then you can basically string the rest out in between, as long as you don't end with an engagement range of that any enemy units, you're fine. So we do something like this, with 2 on the end there, and 2 on the end there. Now, just explaining this coherency, it's a dog bone where basically those 2 guys are within 2 inches of him, he's within 2 inches of them, he's within 2 inches of them, he's within 2 inches of them, so on and so forth. So if anybody asks you about coherency, that's how it works with larger units. Now we remove this last model, and now Angron's unit, Abaddon's unit that's lined up to charge this Land Raider is going to have a shit time, because now if they want to charge the Land Raider, they have to go all the way around, which is going to require like a 12-inch charge, whereas previously they were looking at a 6. So now that unit is not able to achieve its goal, and the same with this Warp Talon unit, they're going to struggle to charge those Khorne Berserkers. Now there's a few things that you can do that are quite interesting. Perhaps what you do here is you put these guys on this side, because they could technically charge over the bloodletters, but if you place them something like this, right, you've now achieved the same goal. These guys have arrived within 9 inches of that spawn, and because these bloodletters are occupying the space where these Warp Talons would need to land, they're not going to be able to charge those Berserkers. And then if your opponent goes, oh, I know what I'll do, I'll charge the Chosen into the bloodletters, I'll charge the Warp Talons into the bloodletters, I'll fight with the Chosen first, kill the bloodletters, and then the Warp Talons will be able to pile into and attack the Berserkers. If your opponent tries to do that, you can just heroically intervene with the Berserkers. And now your opponent's in a world of hurt either way. So being able to summon that unit of bloodletters to create a move block to prevent your opponent from getting where they want to go is fantastic. And the fact that you summon them in your opponent's shooting phase is something that is truly unique. You know, it's not like rapid ingressing where you do it in your opponent's movement phase. This, your opponent moves where they want to move, then based on where they shoot, you get to make this decision. So very, very impactful, and the fact that you can put it right in front of your opponent is what allows this strategy to work. Alright, this last defensive strategy is all about setting up a heroic intervention. So what we have is an objective marker here. There's some goremongers holding it, one of which has taken a bit of a nap. Let's stand him back up again. So we've got some goremongers there, we've got some chaos spawn here. Now, your opponent has a little bit of an understanding of this strategy now, so he's like, okay, I can't just shoot them all off the objective, because if I do so, he's just going to summon models on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my chosen here, and I'm going to advance them out, and they're going to come up like so. And then what I'm going to do is just move them. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this Vindicator out, bop, and it's going to shoot these goremongers, as with the Rhino, as with the Chosen, and I'm going to pick up the goremongers. And what you do is you remove all the goremongers but one, right? They're dead. And now what we're going to do is we're going to summon our Bloodletters in such a way that they're going to threaten a heroic intervention. And this is going to make those Chosen have a really rough time. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to place them so that they're not within charge range of the Chosen, because you don't want them to just charge the Bloodletters and kill them, right? So we're going to position our Bloodletters back here somewhere, essentially further than 12 inches away. And then we're going to remove that last model, right? And now we could come a bit closer. We could be like, oh, we're going to chuck them on this objective. But if you do so, they just charge the Bloodletters and kill them, right? So you put the Bloodletters somewhere where they're a bit further away, making it harder for your opponent to deal with them. Then your opponent goes, cool, now we're going to charge those spawn. They roll, let's say they roll pretty decent for their charge. They roll like a 9 or 8 or 9. And as a result, they have to base contact with as many guys as they can. So they chuck a few guys like this. A lot of them are going to have to come around this way. That should be back there a bit. So they're going to have to do something like this. And then you now get to go, cool, charge move's finished. I'm going to heroically intervene. And I'm going to base contact that guy there, that guy there, that guy there. So those three. And then the rest of them, let's say you didn't roll a 12-inch on your heroic. So the rest of them can't make base, so they're just going to swing around like this and get up close. And now, because your opponent charged, they get to fight first. However, based on the way that they've finished their charge move, if they haven't placed this guy and this guy in base contact, if they've been a bit sloppy, and the same with this guy and this guy, if they're not within base contact, only these three guys are going to be able to fight the Bloodletters. And even if they did go within full base contact, then all 5 of them would, but 5 guys probably don't kill 2 spawn. So now your opponent's in a tricky position where they have to decide whether they go all in on the Bloodletters, all in on the spawn, or 50-50 it, right? If they do 50-50 it and they don't kill those Bloodletters are going to do serious damage into these guys by piling in, getting more OC on that objective than what they have, and doing some heavy damage. And if one of those spawn lives, he's going to contribute to that damage as well. So in result, that's probably going to work out to be a bad trade for your opponent, because they've now committed an entire chosen brick, which is several hundred points. You've committed a unit of spawn, which is less than 100, a unit of Bloodletters, which is less than 100, and a single command point, and you've been able to stop them from successfully taking that objective marker off you. Now, we're going to ignore the fact that in this specific scenario, you would obviously just heroically intervene with the Lord of Skulls. But let's just, to demonstrate the Bloodletter trick, is that you can put them in a position where their heroic intervention is going to be something your opponent didn't plan for. Because when they completed this charge, there was no Bloodletters at the time. And it's only after they've shot something and killed it that then the Bloodletters arrive. And now your opponent can't take that movement back. They've moved in that way to set up that charge. So now they need to decide whether they want to go through with their plan of charging or whether they want to abandon it entirely. And that can be a really effective way of defensively sandbagging an objective and preventing your opponent from taking it from you. All right, this next trick is probably the most obvious case use, and I think is the most World Eater's way of playing this, is using it aggressively to strike deep into your opponent's backfield. So in this case, we've got a Forge Fiend here, and we've got our opponent holding this backfield objective with the Legionaries. And we have nothing that's anywhere near being able to threaten those Legionaries, which means our opponent has pretty confident that they're going to hold that objective marker. However, with Summoned by Slaughter, we're going to be able to move our Forge Fiend out, shoot those Havocs that your opponent has positioned out in the open, which most people wouldn't be too concerned about because they're not holding an objective, so they're not really that relevant. However, when we shoot that unit of Havocs and kill it in the shooting phase, right, in our shooting phase, we've shot and killed it, our opponent then removes casualties. Let's say they remove these 4 first, and there's this 1 Havoc left. Before he gets picked up, we go, no, we're going to use our Summoned by Slaughter stratagem. And then 9 inches from him, which actually gets us all the way over here onto the objective. Barrel of monkeys, these bloodletters. Bloodletters get all the way over onto this objective. In our shooting phase, in our own shooting phase, we're spending the stratagem to summon bloodletters onto the objective, as long as they're within 9 inches, which I'm just going to quickly lift that terrain piece to double check that I've done that correctly, which I don't think I have. Nope, probably a little bit too far. And now I'm knocking things. Bloodletters are going to go something like that. So that they are all within 9 inches of that Havoc. Your opponent then removes that last model. And now we go into our charge phase, and these bloodletters are going to charge these Legionaries and kill them. So having had all of our units back safe where the opponent can't interact with them in our own shooting phase, we're able to send bloodletters in and successfully take our opponent off of their own home objective, which there's some missions like Linchpin, where losing your home objective is a disaster. There's also certain cards like Defend Stronghold that your opponent might keep that thinking that there's no way you're going to get them, but then they don't realize that that Forge Fiend can pop out, it can kill those Havocs, you can summon bloodletters onto their home, you can kill the things holding their home and take that from them. And now your opponent has to turn around and send resources back into this side of the table to deal with those bloodletters, and that's resources that they're not able to send out to contest you on those middle objectives, and they're not going to be able to send out to take your home objective. So being able to use this aggressive push with the bloodletters using Summoned by Slaughter is an amazing way of putting your opponent on the back foot early in the game. Alrighty, for this example, we're going to talk about how to use the Summoned by Slaughter to take objectives off your opponent. Now, in this scenario, imagine that our Forge Fiends are dead, or imagine we're running a World Leaders list that has no shooting, right? And our opponent has cleverly gone, oh, you've got some 8-bound there that want to take my home objective. I'm going to make sure that my Legionaries are further than 22 inches away, so you cannot charge me, and then I'm going to move my Havocs up so that they are not within 7 inches of the objective marker. And we're doing that so that you can't kill those and then 6-inch consolidate onto the marker. Your 8-bound can kill these guys, but from there, there's not much they can do. Your opponent thinks they've outclassed you. But what you can do is you can move your 8-bound up, charge in, kill these Havocs, and then when that last Havoc removes, even if they remove this guy here who's the furthest from the objective, if they remove him last, so these guys have been removed, before they remove that last model, you go, no, sorry, wait, I'm just going to quickly use my Summoned by Slaughter stratagem, and I'm going to just quickly lift this up for a sec to demonstrate. From that guy, you can go 9 inches, you can place one guy there, one guy there, one guy there, 9 inches from him is to there, and you can get almost the entire unit on the objective marker. In fact, I think you can get the entire unit on there based on that. Maybe not quite, maybe all of them bar one. Gets on the objective marker, and now your opponent thought they were being real clever by keeping their Legionaries outside of your charge range, but in doing so, all they've done is allow you in the fight phase to kill something and take the objective off your opponent. Now, obviously, using this stratagem in the fight phase is the least effective way to use it because those bloodletters, it's the fight phase now, so they can't really do anything. Whereas if you were able to kill those havocs in the shooting phase, these bloodletters would now be able to charge these guys. So ideally, you want to be doing it in the shooting phase or in the movement phase if you have impact mortals or something like that from a demon prince with wings. But you can use it in the fight phase if it means you're going to do this. And if this was, like we said, if this was linchpin where you were able to go, you know what, taking this is going to not only deny you your home, but it's going to reduce the victory points your no man's land objectives are worth, that's going to have a pretty significant impact on the game, then you might do this. You are sacrificing a unit of bloodletters and a command point to do so, but little decisions like this can actually have a pretty profound impact on the game. And it's worth noting that if in your opponent's turn they go, cool, well these legionaries are now going to move back to be safe somewhere, they're going to move back over here, and they're going to shoot those bloodletters, and they kill the bloodletters, you can just spend CP to summon more bloodletters, provided it's a new battle round. So if you do, say you went second, and in your turn you went battle round 2, you came out, you killed these havocs, you summon your bloodletters, then it ticks over into battle round 3, and your opponent moves, kills the bloodletters, you can immediately summon more bloodletters there. So you can lock down that objective, and then it's now going to be ticking over into your turn 3, and those bloodletters are free to go and charge and kill the legionaries. So being able to use it to flip an objective like that is another one of those uses that you need to be familiar with because it can have a pretty dramatic impact on the game. Alright, this next example I'm calling the OC dump, and that's where basically our opponent has got this objective here pretty heavily sandbagged. They've got a rhino there, they've got a unit of possessed here for a total of 12 objective control. Now that's typically going to be very hard for World Eaters to take because that's a lot of OC. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this Forge Fiend and these 8-bound to take that objective, utilizing a summon by slaughter, whilst also simultaneously dealing with this unit of Warp Talons. So you move up your 8-bound, they move in nice and close, just up right next to that wall there. Forge Fiend moves to where he is there. Now, normally what you'd do is you'd shoot the Forge Fiend into these possessed, and then charge the 8-bound into the Rhino and hope to take it that way. However, with 8-bound only having OC 1, if that Rhino survives and one possessed survives, you're going to fail to take that objective. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to shoot these Warp Talons, right? And we're going to take them out that way. So what we do is we shoot the Warp Talons, say we kill them, and they remove that last model, giving us the bloodletters. And it's worth noting that that last model is wholly within 9 inches of this point of the objective. So let's say we remove those Warp Talons, something like so. And now, before that last model is removed, we get to place the entire unit, provided they're within 9 inches of that. So we can place 10 OC on this objective here with a unit of bloodletters. This is in the shooting phase. We're placing these guys. All 10 of them on that marker. And then we're going to charge these 8-bound, and we're going to basically put 3 8-bound on that objective marker as well. And we now have 13 OC on that objective marker. So now if we do kill the Rhino, they're not going to be able to pile any guys onto the objective marker, so if we kill it, we take the objective. If we fail to kill it, we still take the objective, so that's really strong. And we could charge those bloodletters into these guys. However, the problem is if we charge in and we fail to kill them, and then 2 or 3 possessed live, they then fight the bloodletters. If they wipe out the bloodletters, we're only going to have 3 OC on there, and they're going to have more. So what you might do in this instance is actually just keep those bloodletters summoned on the objective, but not charge, which means you're now holding that objective, and your opponent has no recourse. Whereas the challenge, because this guy dies now. So this is a very important thing, and this is why I call it the OC dump, and it's why it's distinctly different from the other strategies that we've discussed, is that even though we could charge with these bloodletters, we're actually electing not to, because what we're really trying to do here is not kill things, but dump OC on that objective marker. So now we've got 10 OC from the bloodletters plus the 3 from the 8-bound is 13 OC, and we actually take this objective off our opponent. And if you get a little bit too greedy, a little bit too bloodthirsty, and you charge these bloodletters in, you know, there's every chance that because they're only 2 damage each and there's 3 wounds per possess, there's every chance that you only kill 4 or 5 of them, and then the 5 remaining ones might kill enough bloodletters to stop you from claiming that objective off of your opponent, and then you've wasted the strategy. So it's worth noting when it's appropriate to use this as an aggressive attack, and when it's appropriate to use it as an OC dump. And that's the trick that we're trying to highlight here, is that you don't necessarily always want to charge. I know one of the World Eater's strategies is always be charging, ABC, but it's actually not as simple as ABC. Sometimes you actually just want to dump the OC on the objective and take it from your opponent. You're denying them their primary, you're denying them opportunities, you're making their life difficult without actually having to kill anything. Alrighty, for this next showdown, I'm going to show you how to use bloodletters to block your opponent in their transport. So in this case, this transport here, we're going to say it contains a unit of 10 chosen, right? And we have a Hellbrute here, and basically what we want to do is we want to charge that, kill it, and prevent them from disembarking onto that objective marker. So you can move your Hellbrute up, so like so. Then you've got no shooting because you're just a Hellbrute. So in your charge, and your plan is to kill that transport. Now it's worth noting that at the point that the transport dies, you use this stratagem, and because it's your turn, you get to choose the sequence of things. So before they remove the model, before they disembark their boys, you get to place your bloodletters. And there's a few really neat things you can do here. And the main one is forcing your opponent to take desperate escapes, all right? An emergency disembarkation. So what you can do is you can basically place them. Now, you can't place them within 1 inch of enemy models, with enemy units, but you can place them, if that rhino just died, you can place them like so. Right? And now, by placing the bloodletters all the way around, like so, making sure that you have your dog bone, right, which is 2 on the end there, 2 on the end there. Now, your opponent cannot place those models within 3 inches of that transport because there's bloodletters all blocking the way that you've summoned after you killed it. So your opponent's going to be like, oh no, what am I going to do? I guess I'm going to have to take mortal wounds on a 1, 2, or 3, and I'm going to have to place them within 6 inches back here. And they do so like that. And then you remove the transport, the Hellbrute has fought, killed the transport, you've summoned to block them, and now that Hellbrute can go, cool, I'm going to consolidate back into those chosen. If they fight and fail to kill him, which they probably will because they're only strength 5, if they fail to kill him, he then gets to strike into them as well. But that's a separate strategy, that's the Hellbrute strategy. But the point that I wanted to highlight here is that you can block the disembark. Now, another really interesting thing that you can do is, let's say they haven't disembarked yet. So you've got all these guys here, and the disembark trick is really, really strong. So there's lots of ways you can use it. One way that you could do it is, let's say you've got a Hellbrute has charged, and you also had some 8-bound charge. Right? So let's say hypothetically these 8-bound were over here as well. And your bloodletters are out of the way. Right, so now it's your movement phase. You move, you charge your Hellbrute in here, and you charge the 8-bound in here. Right? Now, normally what's going to happen, let's say hypothetically you don't have the 6-inch piloting consolidate active. This turn you took sustained and lethal hits, right? The Hellbrute fights first, kills the transport. But what your opponent would normally be able to do to avoid you from fighting them is they'd put their heavy weapons together in a clump over here, so the Master of Executions or the Chaos Lord or whoever, plus all the heavy weapons in that chosen unit over there, and then they'd string the rest out. And the idea would be that this way you don't want to pile in that Hellbrute into them because the heavy weapons are probably going to kill you. And you can't pile the 8-bound in because they're going to position themselves in such a way that they're not within 4 inches. Right? Which means that when it comes to your turn, those 8-bound, so you've fought first with the Hellbrute, you've killed the transport. This is how it would normally happen. And you fought first with the Hellbrute, you've killed the transport. These guys are eligible to fight. However, they can't attack these chosen because they get the 3-inch pile in and they're not within engagement range. Therefore, they don't get to make attacks. However, what you can do with the Bloodletters is before they disembark these guys, right? You can go, okay, I'm going to place my Bloodletters here in a line like so, and I'm going to intentionally leave exactly enough space for you to place your chosen. And you can ask your opponent, can I borrow your models to work out some spacing, right? And they'll generally allow you, and if they don't, Bloodletters are on the same base size, so you can always just use your Bloodletters to work it out. But you can make it so that when they disembark, they can fit their entire unit within 3 inches of the transport and not within engagement range of enemy models. And if they can do that, that means they cannot use the emergency disembark or the desperate escape. I always get those two mixed up. I think it's desperate escape is what I'm thinking of. No, that's when you fall back. Emergency disembark is what I'm thinking of. So they can position something like that. They can't fill this space because there's Bloodletters there. And now you go, cool, Bloodletters are dropped. You now disembark. This guy comes away. And now because these 8-bound made a charge move, they're eligible to fight. So they pile in like so. And they all now get to fight those chosen. So by using the Bloodletters, you can force your opponent to disembark in the specific location that you want them to. It can be 6 inches outside of the transport, forcing them to take those emergency disembarkation tests, or it can be within 3 inches of one of your other units that also declared a charge, allowing you to allocate attacks into them as well. So there's a few different ways that you can do this, and the beautiful thing here is if you did it like that, and you go, cool, these guys are now going to pile in here and fight, this guy who just fought as well, before they pile in and fight, he might actually consolidate in as well. Because knowing that when they fight, they're going to wipe most of the unit, the remainder of the unit probably isn't going to kill the Hellbrute, which means when they do fight back, they fight into the Hellbrute, and the Hellbrute picks up the rest of the unit. So there's a few really neat things you can do around the disembarkation of transports. The important things to remember is that you can place your Bloodletters before they place their disembarked models. And when they disembark their models, if they can't place their models within 3 inches of the transport, they have to take that emergency disembarkation test and very likely lose a bunch of their models. And if they can place within 3 inches, they must do so. So you can basically force them to put their guys somewhere where a nearby unit can actually make attacks into them. So there's a few really neat tricks that you can do in terms of disembarkations from transports. All right, the next trick that you'll probably find a ton of different opportunities to use this is messing with your opponent's consolidation moves. So in this example, we've got this unit of possessed here, and we've got some spawn here, and basically what our opponent's planning to do is a very standard technique where you charge the spawn, you kill them, and you consolidate onto the objective marker. So what they're going to do is they're going to move their spawn up however far it is that spawn move. I'm just going to remove this terrain piece to make it a little bit easier to demonstrate. So they move their spawn up. I think they moved 9 inches. They move their spawn up something like so. Then they charge you. They declare a charge in there. Say they roll a 7 for their charge, which is enough to get this guy to there, this guy to there, like so. Something like that. They want to get everybody attacking because spawn are famously hard to kill, so they go something like that. So that everybody's within base contact of a spawn or within base contact of somebody else who's within base contact of a spawn. They chuck their train back. Now, they fight and they kill the spawn. And if you didn't have this stratagem, they would be able to consolidate, because they can't get within base contact of any other enemies. They would be able to consolidate onto this objective marker and take it. Maybe they got area denial, maybe they got secure no man's land and this is the central objective, something like that. But because you know what they're trying to do, you can go, no, no, no. Before I remove my last spawn, so I'm going to remove this one first. Before I remove that last spawn, I'm going to summon my bloodletters like so. And you basically place them 1 inch away from those possessed. And now, those possessed have already made their attacks, so they can't hurt these bloodletters. And now, when they go to do their pile-in moves, they're not going to be able to their consolidation moves, they're not going to be able to consolidate onto that objective marker. They have to consolidate into those bloodletters, which means that they are no longer able to take that objective. So this is a really good way of using them to mess with your opponent's consolidation plans. Alrighty, for this one, it's going to be an extension of the using it to mess with your opponent's pile-in and consolidation moves. So in this example, we've got Scarbrand here, and he's protected by this unit of Goremongers or Jackals or Berserkers or whatever. And then in front of them, we've got a unit of 5 Warp Talents and Abaddon the Despoiler leading a big unit of Chosen. Now, that Abaddon unit could very easily kill Scarbrand. However, they can't charge him because there's all these Goremongers in the way. So what a traditional opponent is going to do is they're going to take these Warp Talons, they're going to move up and they're going to declare a charge, and they're basically going to base contact you like so. Then they're going to move up Abaddon's unit, he's going to charge in as well. And they're going to go something like that. And then what a traditional opponent is going to do is they're going to attack with and it's worth noting at this point, you can't heroically intervene because you can't get within engagement range because you're blocking yourself in a way, right? So no heroic interventions. Your opponent now fights. They fight with the Warp Talons first, killing all of your Goremongers. So they're dead, they're dead, they're dead, and they're dead, right? And now what would typically happen is because Abaddon's unit declared a charge this turn, they're eligible to fight. And units that are eligible to fight get to make a pile-in move and then make their attacks. So he would normally be able to do that, pile in and kill Scarbrand, and you don't get an opportunity to interact with that at all. However, we're Khorne Demonkin, baby, so what we're going to do is, before we remove that last Goremonger, we're going to go, cool, there's a Goremonger right here. We're going to quickly spend a command point, and there's a few ways you can do this. One of them is you can literally just put your bloodletters in effectively the same position that those Goremongers were in. Right? That's one way that you can do it. Essentially like so. And now, if they want to pile in with Abaddon's unit, they can pile into and fight the bloodletters, but they're not going to be hitting Scarbrand, right? Because now that you remove this last model now, the unit's gone, and they're going to pile in, but they're going to hit that same screen. So your opponent, knowing this, is probably not going to do it, but it's one of those things that's a deterrent. Basically, having those Goremongers there prevents your opponent from being able to do it cleanly, and having the CP and the bloodletters in reserves allows you to do this sort of stuff to block them. Another real neat thing that you could do is go behind them. So you don't necessarily have to go between you and Scarbrand, because pile in and consolidate moves have to end closer to the closest. So say this is that same last Goremonger, before we remove him as a casualty, you could place your bloodletters along this way. And now, your bloodletters are further than 1 inch from the opponent, like so. All right, now you remove that last one. And now, yes, Abaddon's unit declared a charge this turn, so it is eligible to fight. However, Abaddon, if he wants to pile in, he can't pile in to Scarbrand. He has to pile in to the closest enemy, which is the Bloodletters. Same as this guy, same as this guy, same as this guy, same as this guy, this guy, this guy. You know, even this guy here is probably closer to the Bloodletters than he is to Scarbrand. And now these three guys, like, it'd be questionable. I'd say this guy's closer to the Bloodletters, so he actually can't pile in that way, so he'd have to go this way. These two guys are probably more or less equal distance from there and there. However, their pile-ins can't break coherency, so they can't go into Scarbrand. They're going to have to come back this way as well. And now you're able to go, cool, they're going to kill those Bloodletters. That's fine. Because now it ticks over to your turn and your opponent is on that objective. So if you know that you've still got Storm Hostile Objective or Overwhelming Force as options in your deck, maybe you want to force them to stay on the objective. That's a really neat trick that you can use. And basically the reason that I wanted to highlight that you can put them in front or behind is to just show that you can use it to pull your opponent into the specific direction that you want them to go when it comes to pile in and consolidate. You can either prevent them from tagging things that you want, prevent them from getting on objectives that they want, or force them to go onto objectives that they don't want. There's lots of different ways that you can use this in terms of consolidation and pile in jank. Alright, this final trick is my favorite by far, and I call it the summoned by suicide trick, where you've got a unit of Goremongers here. We've got Abaddon the Despoiler leading 10 chosen. There's tons of OC on this objective. There's no way we're taking it. And then all the way over here, we have a Rhino holding our opponent's home. Now, our opponent's been really smart and they've put that Rhino so that it's 21 inches away from these Goremongers. So even with their 9-inch move, they're not going to be able to declare a charge on that Rhino. So typically, we would have no mechanism for taking that objective. However, what we're going to do is we're going to be real sneaky and we're going to move these Goremongers, they're 9 inches this way, so that they're as far as possible, as many of them as far as possible, and as far away from Abaddon and his unit as possible, with the exception of a couple of guys at the front. A couple of guys at the front want to be close, but everybody else as far away from Abaddon as possible. Then we're going to charge, say we roll something healthy like a 7-inch on our charge, we basically place these two guys in, charging. This guy now can't base contact because of where these two are placed. So none of these guys can base contact. So they're all free to move as long as they end their move closer to Abaddon's unit and within engagement range. So we're literally just going to make sure that we meet those criteria. So we're going to put this guy here to keep the coherency and move these guys across, making sure that we stay within 9 inches of this objective marker. And I think you know what we're going to do. So basically, we've now charged Abaddon's unit. We fight it. We don't kill even one chosen. Maybe we kill one chosen because we got lucky, right? Abaddon's unit then swings and absolutely shreds those Goremongers. So we start going, okay, cool, we've got to remove these as casualties. We remove these three, we remove these three, we remove this one. And then before we remove that one, we go, boom, spending one command point to summon our Bloodletters 9 inches away from that one Goremonger over on this objective here. And now we have successfully taken that objective off of our opponent by using Goremongers and suiciding them into Abaddon's unit. There's tons of different scenarios where you can do this. Sometimes you might want to do it to take the objective that Abaddon is on. So for example, if it's a model like, say it's an opponent World Leaders player and they have Scarbrand and he's sitting on an objective but he's only OC, 5 or 6? If you throw something in, like 2 spawn, Scarbrand kills the 2 spawn, you can then summon your Bloodletters onto the objective, taking it off of Scarbrand. You know, there's tons of examples like that. So sometimes you want to use it to take the objective that they're on, but other ones, and this is why I wanted to use this example, you can actually stretch out so that when you know which model is going to be removed last, and you can create those 9-inch bubbles of opportunity from wherever you want by basically stringing out, charging in such a way that not everybody can make base contact, using that to move big distances with your charges to get your models to be where you want them to be when they die, so that you can then summon off of that. And you can launch those Bloodletters deep into your opponent's lines by suiciding off of their bottle. This is really good on the Goremongers because they have that infiltrate keyword. They're going to be able to get in positions where they're actually going to be able to push themselves really deep. And when they die, they're going to die deep in their opponent's lines. You very rarely want to use this in your own lines, like dying on your own home objective or your own expansion objective. You know, that's not generally where you're going to want to be summoning Bloodletters. You're going to want to be summoning them in places where they can threaten your opponent. And this is an example of how to do that. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, subscribe, all that good shit. I really do appreciate your support on this. Every person that likes and subscribes chucks comments in the below. That feeds the algorithm and it helps get this information out to more people. There's plenty of people out there that are struggling with World Eaters right now and I want to help them and I need your help to do so. So by liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing this video, we go a long way towards building a bigger and better and stronger community of World Eaters players. If you want to join my Discord community directly, you can do so by signing up on Patreon. And basically we talk lists in there, we share hobby updates, we talk banter, we share memes, we have a ton of fun. And depending on which tier you choose, we also have one-on-one coaching with myself where I can help you work through some of these different techniques. And we can work on that together as a team. So with that being said, thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.